The first session is by Mr. Alexander Wimmer, Head of Technology and Innovation, Constantia Teich. Topic, a strategy to reach net zero in 2040. Sir, can we have you on stage? With a huge round of applause, everyone. Stage also.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the kind introduction. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining my presentation. As mentioned before, I will present a strategy to reach net zero in 2040. Here you can see the highest mountain of Austria. It's not as high as the highest mountain of India, but it's the so-called Großglockner, which is around 3,800 meters. Let me use the laser pointer. Here you can see our most famous glacier. It's the so-called Pasterze. I took this picture 1 year ago, and now you can see a picture 120 years ago. As you can see, it's the same perspective, and it changed significantly. Within 120 years, the glacier lost, I would say, 99% of its volume. So this clearly indicates that the climate change is also happening in Austria. I guess all of you know the so-called Keeling curve. Starting in April, CO2 level in the atmosphere is going down because we have spring on the northern hemisphere. And when we have autumn on the northern hemisphere, CO2 is going up again. It's evolving this way because we have more landmass on the northern hemisphere than on the southern hemisphere. So as long as it was going up and going down again, it is no problem. But if we go back to the 50s, you can see going up in winter, going down in summer, going up again. But over the last 50 years, you can see the CO2 level here. CO2 level was significantly increasing. We're starting with 1 ppm per year, 1.5, 2, and at the moment we have an increase of 2.5 ppm a year. So you can see even the change in the last 50 years changed the climate in Austria significantly. And if we will continue this way, it would have a drastic impact. That's the reason why in European Union and in Austria we have the net zero strategy. European Union said reaching net zero in 2050, which is even a hard job, but Austria said we will make it better, we will reach it in 2040, which makes it really hard for the industry because it means 17 years from now. But we have to change something to stop the climate change. Now I will present the strategy for our plant in Austria. So we are part of Constantia Flexibles with 9,000 employees. Constantia Teich in Austria is our biggest plant. You can see it here. We have more than 1,000 employees. It's located about 60 kilometers eastern of Vienna. Here you can see our main products. We are producing flexible packaging based on aluminum. We are using about 70,000 tons of aluminum each year, 70,000 tons. And from this we produce about 1,000 square kilometers of flexible packaging. We make this butter wrap or these coffee capsules, probably you know Nespresso. We have these chocolate wrappers, also aluminum foil and aluminum containers for pharmaceutical products, and the chocolate wrapping for Easter time or Christmas time. These are our most famous customers. And to achieve a net zero strategy, we use the Six Sigma strategy, which means we started with a define phase and with a measure phase. Here you can see our full value chain. We are starting with a rolling mill. We have 2 rolling mills. Then we have a basic converting department. We have our own lacquer production, which is producing about 10,000 tons of lacquer each year. We are one of the biggest lacquer producers in Austria. Then we have the printing department, and finally we have the final converting. Let me start with the rolling department. We have at the moment 5 rolling mills where we are producing 70,000 tons of foil. Soon we will get an additional rolling mill, and then we will produce up to 100,000 tons of foil each year. Here you can see a furnace for annealing in the rolling mill. We have the rolling mill itself, and afterwards a separator. We start with an aluminum foil with a thickness of 600 microns and rolling it down to 5 microns, dependent on the product. So after rolling of the aluminum foil, rolling consumes about 40 million kilowatt hours a year in our plant. After rolling, we have the basic converting, which means we are covering the aluminum foil with a plastic film or with a paper film. We do this either by lacquering or laminating. We can do this with a width up to 1,800 millimeters. And additional to lacquering and laminating machines, we have a co-extrusion machine, which means making a plastic film onto aluminum, a so-called extrusion layer. We can do this with PP, with PE. The next step in our value chain is printing. We are both using retrogravure printing, which is using solvents, which means acetone, ethanol, MEK. And we have UV flexo printing, which is more environmental friendly because it's without organic solvents. Finally, we have our final converting department or finishing department, where we have real cutting machines to cut the 1,800 millimeter coils to smaller coils. We have laser perforation for special products. We have 10 embossing machines to make a structure onto the aluminum foil. We have 80 die cutting machines, and with these 80 die cutting machines, we are producing 15 billion yogurt lids a year. And finally, we have deep drawing. With this deep drawing, we are producing containers for food and pet food, when we are producing roughly 1 billion containers a year. So it was important to understand the process, because you have to understand the process to develop a strategy to reach net zero. Here you can see our CO2 emissions for the last 8 years. We started in 2015. The bright green are the scope 1 emissions, which means direct emissions from combustion of natural gas from the solvents. And dark green is scope 2, which means electricity. As you can see, scope 2 emissions were going up and up until 2018, as our energy supplier used more and more coal energy to produce electricity. In 2018, we decided to only buy green electricity, and with this we cut our emissions by 50%. But as you can see, the scope 1 emissions, they are sticking at around 30,000 tons. They are not going down. However, that's still not bad, because every year we have a production increase by about 5 to 10%, and we still have the same level of emissions. But to develop now a strategy to reach net zero, we need to go into detail. So from our 30,000 tons a year, about 50% are from the combustion of natural gas, and 50% are from the combustion of the when we do lacquering, we have to dry the lacquer. You get waste gas with a content of acetone, ethanol, MEK. We have to combust this, and these are the other 50% of our emissions. So now, going from this, we go into detail. In the past, we had an energy analysis once a year. Now we have it once a month. So every department, again, you can see the rolling mill, the basic converting, the print, the finishing. Each department has a budget for gas, so they are allowed to use a certain amount of gas. Every month we get the actual consumption and we get the deviation in percent. These are the absolute numbers, but we also have relative numbers. How much gas did we use per 1,000 square meters of foil? Because you can see on the left side it looks pretty good, but on the right side we can see that the rolling mill didn't perform really well in this month. We also have here an additional column with the costs, but I'm not allowed to show it because our competitor could sit inside here, so I'm not allowed to show. But we have it on the kilowatt hours and also on the price. This is the picture for gas. We also have it for electricity, budget, actual consumption, also the relative numbers. We have it for CO2. So each department has a certain CO2 budget. And we have it for nitrogen. We are using about 2 million cubic meters of nitrogen a year in our printing process. And we have it for compressed air and water. So this table is pretty big and not so easy to understand. So we also have graphics in our system. We have the dashed red line is the budget for gas for January. The full column is the actual consumption. The same for electricity. The dashed column is the budget. The full column is the consumption. The gray line was the produced square kilometers of 2022. Black dots are the actual production and the gray dots is the planned budget. So as you can see, electricity and gas demand was going down, but not mainly because we performed better, it was mainly because economy in Europe was going down a bit. We also have more detailed numbers for each department, for electricity, for gas, and again the picture for CO2. And this system is pretty important for us because we are a member of the European emission trade system and we have to buy CO2 certificates, and it's important to know how much certificates do we need until the end of the year. So with this we have a clear picture of our emissions, and with this we can set milestones how to achieve net zero. As I mentioned before, 50% of our emissions are from gas, 50% are from solvents, so we have a strategy for solvents and for gas. First, I will present the strategy for the solvents. Per year, we are using about 8,000 tons of solvents, which are producing about 15,000 tons of CO2. Our first step will be using biogenic ethanol. At the moment, we still use biogenic ethanol, but it's not certified. And if in the European Union something is not certified, it's not accepted. Consequently, we have to find a partner which has certified biogenic ethanol, then it's allowed to count it as net zero suitable. It's the so-called RED II guideline from the European Union Renewable Energy Directive. In the midterm, we are planning to use also other biogenic solvents, which means using, for example, biogenic ethyl acetate, biogenic MEK, or biogenic acetone. And in the long term, we are planning not to combust our solvents, we are planning to recover them in a solvent recovery plant. But as we are using up to 50 solvents in our plant, it's not so easy to recover the pure solvents. But this is the clear strategy for solvents. Now, this is the strategy for natural gas. We are planning to use biomethane instead of natural gas. Our demand at the moment is about 80 million kilowatt hours per year, which is 40% of the biomethane production of Austria at the moment. So it's not so easy to source so much biomethane. But we still have 17 years for it. Then we are also planning to produce and use biodiesel. And last but not least, we will also use solid biogenic substrates like wood in a combined heat and power plant. So this is already my last slide. Again, you can see our CO2 pathway of the last 8 years. At the moment, we are about 30,000 tons. We will reduce this number by about 6,000 tons or 20% with liquid and gaseous biomass, which means biodiesel, biomethane. Another 25% will come from solid biomass, which means wood. Again, 25% will be reduced by biogenic solvents and solvent recovery. Of course, we have to increase our efficiency. And last but not least, at every other company, we will need about 15 to 20% of compensation measures. With this, I would like to close my talk. If you have any questions, please send me an email, send me on WhatsApp. Thanks a lot. Thanks for your attention.